Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I'm your host, Vered Kogan, and I'm so grateful to have a very special guest with us today, Stephan Spencer. Stephan is an internationally recognized SEO expert. He's a serial entrepreneur, a best-selling author of 3 books, a consultant, and a professional speaker. He has keynoted and spoken at hundreds of conferences and has contributed to numerous marketing journals and blogs and magazines like the Harvard Business Review, Adweek, and many others. He currently hosts 2 top-rated podcasts that I highly encourage you to check out called Marketing Speak and Get Yourself Optimized. Stephan, it is such a joy and an honor to have you here with us today. Thank you.
Oh, the honor is mine, Vered. Thank you.
So we always like to kick things off on this show with you sharing a little bit of how in the world you got to doing the cool things that you're doing today. Would you be willing to share a little bit of that story with us?
Sure. It's got a lot of left turns and surprises. And like I dropped out of a PhD in the middle of it, studying for a PhD in biochemistry to start an internet company in 1995. So that was a big shift. And then in 1999, I got this wild idea that I could live anywhere in the world because, it's the internet. So I applied for permanent residency in New Zealand, and I got in, and I convinced my wife at the time and my kids to make that move all the way around the world. And in 2010, I sold my agency, and 2010, 12 till 2013, I took almost 3 years off. Kind of. I worked maybe not even half time, but I would travel the world following Tony Robbins around. I was in what was called the Platinum Partnership. So that was amazing and life-changing. I met my wife through Tony Robbins. I met her at Date with Destiny, one of his premier events. And it's just been a wild ride. I spent 9 months in Israel, just got back in the States at the end of April. So that was an amazing time. A difficult time, of course, because of COVID, but also very rewarding, and the energy there is incredible. So it's we're always on the move, doing something interesting, and it's all about growth and contribution for me.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. And I'm curious, what was it that, whether it was intuition or something that led you to drop out of a PhD program? What was it?
Yeah, I don't believe in randomness. Everything happens for a reason. And at the time, I was having a run-in with my advisor at that time, who wanted me to be at the bench working all hours of the night. And I had a young family, and I didn't like that idea. And I rebelled against it. And he gave me an ultimatum: either leave my lab and find another lab in the Institute. Is the Institute for Molecular Virology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And there was the option of just dropping out and getting a master's degree instead of a PhD. And I opted for that. I didn't want to start over. And I was questioning even if I wanted to end up doing a postdoc and then professorship and all that. And so I decided I'm going to jump onto the internet bandwagon. I had just gotten back from a conference at the time that had Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web, as one of the keynote speakers. So that was pretty phenomenal. I got to meet one of the co-founders of Netscape, a guy named Rob McCool, who invented Netscape Server. And that was very early days, 1994. People weren't even using Netscape yet. They were still using Mosaic. And so I was starstruck by all the internet luminaries I had met at this conference, the Second International World Wide Web Conference. And I decided, okay, I'm going to just make that leap. The Chinese proverb to leap and then the net will appear. Yeah, so that's what I did.
So I'm so grateful that you shared that with us, because a lot of the people listening might have that kind of, intuition or the kind of urge to do something gutsy, courageous, like you did, right? They're on a path, and maybe it's a path that they can see themselves through. They could, all that, but there's a part of them that says, what if, right? Or maybe this is not quite it for me. So what would you say to those individuals that are there, but are just experiencing so much fear of the unknown? And, they're kind of doubtful of those instincts.
Well, fear is the opposite of love. It's not hate that's the opposite of love. It's fear. So if you live in fear, you live in the opposite of love. And that's a real shame. So I want to be outside of my comfort zone as much as possible. That means stretching myself and doing things that are uncomfortable or are outside of my area of expertise, or have something about it that doesn't feel natural. And it's not that I don't want to be in the state of flow and be natural and all that. It's that I want to grow all the time. And I want to grow proactively. I don't want to get hit in the head by a brick by the universe in order to make a change. I want to do it on my own calling, and to be able to do this because I choose it, rather than I'm reacting to something that happened in my life. I learned years and years ago that the universe drops these very gentle feathers on your shoulder, and you could very easily ignore them. Problem is you ignore them long enough and they turn into bricks, and then those bricks, when they fall on you, they hurt. And you can continue to ignore those, but then the Mack truck shows up, and that's really, really bad. So I don't even want the bricks to show up. Heck, I don't even want the feathers to show up yet. I want to use my intuition to preempt those feathers and say, okay, I'm going to beat the feather. I'm going to intuit the feather before it even lands on me. And so I'm constantly looking for opportunities like that.
Well, let's dive right into this topic of intuition and synchronicity and all of that, because it's a topic that for many people is kind of unknown. It's like there's a part of them that believes it, but a part of them doesn't believe it, perhaps. And yet it's a natural thing that we all experience in some way in our life. It's a universal human experience. And one of the things that I know from my training with the Institute of Heart Math, which is a research institution that studies the optimal state, right? That get optimized kind of state of flow, is that when we are coherent, when we're in a state of alignment and we ask for guidance, then we can trust what comes back to us in the form of intuition. And the research with serial entrepreneurs, there was a lot of research done out of Australia and other areas where they saw that those individuals were successful over and over and over again. Sometimes, when what they decided went against data, right, against the evidence of what, they could do or should do. But yet 80% of them trusted their intuition, and that is what they credit for their success. How does that fit for you? What have you noticed as you look back at your very successful career?
Yeah. So I didn't realize that these were intuitive hits until after the fact, many years after the fact in some cases. For example, when I decided to move to New Zealand, that was against conventional wisdom. At the time, it was late 90s. Everyone was moving from, let's say, the Midwest, where I was based at the time in Wisconsin, moving to the Bay Area, to Silicon Valley. That's where everything was happening. And people thought I was nuts for moving to New Zealand. Like, that's an island in the middle of nowhere. Why? You should be moving to Silicon Valley. That's where you're going to get really big. And I'm like, no, it doesn't feel right to me. It feels like I should be going to New Zealand. And they're like, why? Why New Zealand? I don't know. It's just inside of me. There's something driving me to New Zealand. I have no idea what that is, but I know it's going to be amazing. And I didn't have a name for it. I didn't call it intuition. I just knew that I wanted to be in New Zealand. And it ended up being the most beautiful time that we spent there. It was 7.5 years. It was magical. We ended up being very successful because of it, not just in terms of quality of life and lifestyle, but also in terms of business. For example, we were able to acquire really incredible talent because we were paying in US dollars, and and spending money in Kiwi dollars, New Zealand dollars. And at the time it was like 40 cents to the dollar. It was a real bargain to hire the top talent, and Kiwi companies, New Zealand companies couldn't afford to spend the kind of money that we were willing to spend because we had US clients. It worked out beautifully. We were able to grow and have an office block from the beach in Browns Bay. It was magical. And it wasn't until a year ago, just about exactly a year ago, where I had a psychic reading, the first one in my entire life. And the guy who gave me the reading, he had been a guest on my podcast, and he saved a family member's life during my interview of him, which I can get to. So I was curious. It had cracked open the door to this whole world of psychic phenomenon and the unseen world. And so I had a reading with him, and he nailed it. He had so many things to tell me that he couldn't have known any other way than to tap into what my wife calls the universal Google. Okay. So he just knew things that I had even forgotten about my mother, for example. He knew. So in this interview, or in this reading, at the end of it, he's telling me, Stephan, pay attention to your intuition and follow it. I didn't understand the significance of that. I didn't understand that intuition was the whispers of your angels or your higher self or the upper realms speaking to your consciousness. I did not understand that at the time. All I knew was my simple understanding of intuition was just a gut feel. But it sunk in. I paid attention to what he said, and I implemented it in my life, and things have been amazing, miraculous, nothing short of miraculous, because I had been following my intuition. Somebody pops into my mind and I call them, even though I haven't spoken to them for 2 or 3, 5 years. Somebody pops into my mind, and I'll at least shoot them an email or send them a text if I don't have time to make a phone call. And that might seem silly, like that's just random synapses firing. But the thing is nothing's random, especially if it just comes in completely without prompting. It's just unexpected, comes in unexpected, emotionally charged neutral. There's no anxiety, excitement, fear, anything associated with it. Just simply is, and it stays there. It doesn't move, doesn't jump to the next thought, to the next thought, to the next thought, to the next thought. Next thing you know, you're like, oh yeah, that's right, I need to pick up milk from the store or whatever. No, it just sticks. And that's an intuitive hit. Pay attention to those.
Well, would you be willing to share a couple of those stories for some people that are like, I get it conceptually, but give me some more evidence here. What things have happened to you or for you?
Well, after I had prayed for God to give me a job, and this came from me interviewing another psychic, Sheila Gillette, and prepping for that interview, seeing her explain in this interview, this video interview that I watched, her near-death experience and how she had prayed to God, please let me stay on this planet, let me raise my kids, give me a job, just give me a job, please give me a job. And I just, that stuck with me for months. Finally, a few months later, I decided I'm going to pray for a job too. And then I don't know how else to describe it, but the veils were thinned or lifted. And so I could see much more about how the universe worked. And then all these, without a doubt, signs started showing up in my life. And I'll give a quick example of one. Now, this is beyond intuition, because intuition just feels like you're just following your gut to a lot of folks. At least, that's my understanding from people I've talked to. But when you get a without a doubt sign, you think, whoa, we're living in a simulation or something. This is just too out there. And an example of that is I was reading from a book that I was guided to, following my intuitive breadcrumbs to get to that point. It was a spiritual book. And it turns out I was supposed to follow this particular author's writings and recommendations, among others. But there was a life-changing event that happened because I did follow these intuitive breadcrumbs leading to her. So I'm reading from her book, And I didn't even buy it yet. I was just starting this process. So I was using Amazon's look inside the book feature. So I'm reading through like the introduction or first chapter or whatever, but I'm also listening to a podcast in the background at the same time, which I don't recommend. It's multitasking. It doesn't work. But I was doing it. And the word I am reading at the very moment I'm reading it comes through the podcast and the audio, which was really wild. That had never happened to me before. But I didn't do anything with it. All I did is I just kept reading and listening. But I'm like, whoa, that's wild. That's a without a doubt sign. Okay. So that in retrospect, this isn't just a hello. This is, you need to get off your butt and take some action here. You get these angel numbers and all these things like 1111 all the time. Or it's not just, hi, we're here. We love you. I mean, that's part of it. But a lot of it's like, okay, now it's time to tune in and turn up the volume, increase your download bit rate or whatever. So you're not just getting angel numbers, you're getting incomplete messages, instructions, ideas, inventions, right? Whatever. So, I'm continuing to read and listen, and it happens again 5 minutes later. I'm like, whoa, okay, I got it. I'm supposed to do something here. And that time I did remember what the word was, because that's a question I often get. What was the word that was repeated? It was the word parents. The word parents. I'm listening to an episode of the Melissa Rivers show about coronavirus, and it wasn't about parenting. It was about coronavirus. There was a patient on there, and there was a doctor on there. It was from last year. So I'm listening to that. And the book is a spirituality book. It was called Ask White Dove by Michelle White Dove. And that wasn't about parenting either. Now, I don't remember what the first word was because it was just too weird for me. It didn't register. I didn't think about what was that word again. I just kept reading, as I said. But that second time, that got my attention to the nth degree. So then I stop what I'm doing. I go to her website. I end up joining her Patreon community, and there's some life-changing stuff in there that I found. But if I hadn't done something with that hit, it was, like I said, more than an intuitive hit. It was a big neon sign flashing in front of my face, like, hey, this is important. And if you want those sorts of things, ask for them, pray for them, because they'll come. If you want dreams, ask for dreams. That was another thing. I watched a webinar from Karen Noe, this amazing medium, who explained how to receive messages from angels and from loved ones who have passed. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this. And I asked for a dream and to be woken up from the dream so that I could remember it. And I got the most beautiful, incredible, otherworldly vision type of dream that I'd never received before. It was heavenly. It was absolutely heavenly. And that was the very night that I had watched the webinar and prayed for a vision like that, prayed for a dream. Yeah. So you can open yourself up to it. Even if you're a skeptic. I was a skeptic. I was agnostic, almost atheistic until age 42. Scientist, always about the scientific method, testing stuff out, biohacking and life hacking and, reverse engineering things, algorithms. Yeah. But yeah, there's so much more to life. It really is like the Matrix, but we're not batteries.
Thank you for these stories and these examples. That's kind of the coolest way to learn things, so that we're curious to just experiment and see what shows up for ourselves. It's very interesting because I've been trained in a variety of modalities to connect with our deeper self, our deeper knowing. One of those is Hawaiian Huna. Ancient Hawaiian Huna. Yeah. And very briefly in Huna, we speak of, we have the higher conscious mind or super conscious mind, or some might call it spirit. Yeah, different names, right? Heart math might call it, the non-local intuition. Yeah, whatever label we give to that. We have the conscious mind and we have the unconscious or subconscious mind. And to your point about asking for it, in Huna, we believe that there is no direct link between the conscious mind and our higher self. It is really when we integrate our conscious and unconscious mind, when there is a state of coherence, and then we ask for that guidance, that really our highest and best self can present itself to us in the form of intuition or a synchronistic event of something that will guide us to the path of least resistance for us to get what we want. And so what that means is that if I am asking, consciously or unconsciously asking for guidance, for help from a state of fear and distress, then what's coming back to me might not be trustworthy. Where we know it is trustworthy is when we're coherent, when we are feeding the field around our body with love, expanding that field. And when we ask from that state, then we can trust that. And the only way to know that is to take those actions and notice what evolves, right? Those kind of feathers, if you will, as you said. Now, a lot of people say to me, well, what if I don't follow the feather or that urge to make the call or listen to the podcast or, get on Amazon and read the book? What will happen? And so what is your answer for that?
One of the books I'm reading is it's called You Were Born for This. And it's about delivering miracles in everyday life, like all the time. And if you get this intuitive hit to pull off the road and help somebody who's a stranded motorist, or to give money to a homeless person, don't ignore it. Or to talk to the person, because that person could later on decide to commit suicide, but something you said or something you did changed their mind. And if you take this seriously and not just wait for it reactively, but proactively ask for it, just like you ask for a dream and you might get it, you could ask to deliver miracles. Yeah. And that's part of the book. And that's something that I was led to. Again, this was a synchronistic, meant for me event to be in this mastermind with 7 other entrepreneur men who were all reading this book I'd never heard of before together. And it just so happened it started the following week after I met the guy who was running this group. He told me about the book. There's something that told me I needed to tell him about a book that I hadn't even read yet. And I still haven't read. This was like 5 months ago. And it was called Your Utmost for His Highest. Something told me I needed to tell him about the book. And he's like, that's one of my favorite books. Yeah, it's from the 1920s. It's not exactly a new bestseller, but I've read it a bunch of times. It's right here on my bookshelf. That's amazing. And later on in the conversation, he invites me to be in this mastermind. It's like, I don't know you very well. This is our first conversation, and I wasn't planning on doing this, but I feel called to do this, to invite you in this mastermind. We're reading a book together. You were born for this, and so forth. And one aspect of that book that really stands out for me is the asking. I do that all the time. Most days I ask God to send me. Here I am, please send me. And he sends me. And the stuff that I end up delivering for him, I know has saved lives, at least has changed the course of their life massively for the better in many, many cases. So ask, just simply ask. Oh, and there's another piece I wanted to mention too about, you were talking about the conscious and the unconscious. There's also the collective unconscious. And this is something that Carl Jung wrote quite a lot about and did a lot of research on. And that's the field. That's where you tap into the knowing, whether somebody is not feeling well or they're suicidal or whatever, and you didn't even see them. You just get this intuitive hit that you need to call that person. Yeah. You're tapped into a collective unconscious. You're also tapped into angels and the higher realms. But, it depends on what your belief system is, whether you're receptive to that or not. I didn't really I said, believe in angels and much of anything supernatural until recent years, until I was in my 40s. But it's everyone has their own journey. But if you like science and you respect Carl Jung and his work, he's the guy who came up with the term synchronicity. He was experiencing synchronicity firsthand, and he was so taken by it that he decided to start a whole branch of research in it and write an entire book on it. And of course, he coined the term in the process. The book is called Synchronicity, and the phenomenon is called synchronicity. And the way it started, I'll just briefly share, is he was in his office with a patient doing a psychoanalysis session. He hears a tap on his window. Now they're 3 stories up. So it's not like somebody tapping on the window 3 stories up, right? Mm-hmm. And the room is darkened for the session. So why would somebody be trying to tap into on the window of a 3-story up window? And it's a darkened room. It doesn't make any sense, right? But it was insistent, the tapping, and insistent and incessant. So he finally gets up, checks the window, and lo and behold, at the window is something that defies all logic. Well, what I need to tell you is the woman that was being psychoanalyzed, she was in the middle of a dream recall. She was talking about this necklace. It was a scarab necklace. It was very significant, this necklace in the dream. And what was tapping on her on their window, on Carl's window, was a scarab beetle. Like, what are the odds? It's essentially 0. This was an otherworldly event. He opens the window, lets the scarab beetle in, catches it, presents it to this woman who believed in nothing supernatural, nothing that wasn't tangible and of the seen world. He presents it to her. Here's your scarab beetle, as she's recalling the scarab beetle necklace in the dream. Changed her life. Also changed his life, as you know, because he started down this whole branch of research and study.
Thank you for sharing that story. And it's just, in this podcast, we talk a lot about the power of thought and the power of emotions. I mean, you said at the very beginning, I followed a feeling. That's what you didn't even know it was intuition, but it was a gut feel. It was a feeling. And, and it's not something that we can hold in our hand per se, but yet we know from research that thoughts and emotions are things. We can measure vibrations. We can measure things. And for those people who are listening, who are very curious now, might not believe in God or the universe or whatever that is, and just to be curious, to suspend disbelief long enough to just have their own experiences. And that's the only way to know what is true for us, just to perhaps follow an intuitive insight and just to be curious without any attachment to an outcome, and to notice what is true and right for them. And so for those individuals that want to start a business, grow a business, change careers, there's some lack of fulfillment or curiosity where they are now in that part of their life. What do you recommend, since you've been a very successful serial entrepreneur, you've done a lot of things, you've met a lot of people, what do you recommend for those individuals with regards to their inner world? What can they tap into? What, if anything, can support them to take those next right steps?
Yeah. So if they don't believe in anything supernatural or bigger than themselves, then I would start by reading the book Proof of Heaven by Eben Alexander, who experienced a near-death experience and was forever changed by it. And he's a neuroscientist and very brilliant man and very credible man. So I would start there. And as you said, this idea of suspending disbelief is critically important. So go through your day with this mindset of the willing suspension of disbelief. That will open you up to miracles. if you do already believe in a higher power and you just don't know how to have a conversation with your higher power, whether you call it God or the divine or the universe or whatever. By the way, I would suggest, this is just a suggestion, but I would suggest maybe not referring to God as the universe, because the universe is it's both good and bad. Right? What's the word? It's help me out here.
Duality, polarity.
It's duality. Yeah, it's duality. So if you're asking the universe for things, you're asking for the negative as well. I mean, we learn from the negative, and the hand of God is in everything. So even the tragedies and the travesties and all the stuff that we don't want in life, also be sure to be grateful for that stuff, because in the bigger picture, it is all for your highest good. But if you can trust that the hand of God is behind everything, and then you start asking God for things that will help you to show up more powerfully in life, and not just for God to be like a genie granting your wishes, like I want a bigger car and house and whatever, but instead I want more wisdom. I want more certainty. I want more desire to change the world, to fix whatever my issues are in my own personal life or whatever. If you pray for those things, every prayer is heard. Every prayer is heard. Not every prayer is answered in the way that you want it, but every single prayer is heard. So if you pray to God, or whatever you want to call God, other than the duality of the universe, because you're going to get a lot of stuff you don't want, more than if you just pray directly to God. So, that's something that I would recommend is start asking, and make this more of a dialogue. Pray, pray, pray is just you asking, you talking. Not a very great conversationalist if all you do is talk, right? If, on the other hand, you're listening even more than you're talking, which is the sign of a really good conversationalist and person. So listen more than you talk. And how do you listen? Meditate. Now, you're not going to get the messages probably during your meditations, but it's going to quiet your monkey mind and allow you to receive. Also, if you focus your mind on pure thoughts, which then lead to pure words and pure actions, so you are congruent with purity. Don't watch porn, don't lust after the neighbor's wife or any of that stuff, because that messes with your ability to receive messages. So if you are interested in this being a conversation with God, with your higher power, then you need to listen. And part of the secret to success with listening in this regard is to meditate and quiet that monkey mind. And then the second piece is to be as pure as possible, thought, word, and deed.
Thank you, Stephan, for sharing that. And it's very aligned with what we know from research in terms of the techniques out of HeartMath that does a lot of research on non-local intuition that comes from a field beyond time and space, which we know that the physical heart is connected to something beyond time and space. There are a variety of experiments that have shown that the physical heart deaccelerates, depending on something that hasn't even happened yet, a few seconds before an event. So we know that there is something there, and what you're sharing is absolutely aligned, right? So you talked about this duality, because everything in creation has two ends to it. Yeah. Fear, love, right? However you want to look at it, right? These two ends. And so when we are able to be in that state of love or appreciation, compassion, right? You mentioned at the beginning, there's fear and there's love, right? When we are in that state of love, then essentially, if you imagine a triangle, right, where we've got the two bottom ends of the triangle right here, when you are in a state of love, then what happens is that your conscious and unconscious mind are working together harmoniously, right? Head, heart, gut, it's all working together. And in that state, you're able to receive from that place of non-local, from that, to receive that non-local intuition. So what that means is that, in essence, I am asking my higher self when I'm in that coherent state and I'm able to receive it, because I'm kind of at the tip of the triangle. I kind of accept what is, and I'm kind of at the tip and this neutral objective place where I'm not attached to either side of the dichotomy, either end, and I'm just in a state of receiving whatever comes, being very, very curious, and as you said, following those little breadcrumbs, those little feathers, because they are there for a reason for us, even when there's a little bit of fear or doubt, just to suspend that long enough to experiment, of course, and see what might happen, of course, in a healthy way, making sure that we're honoring our own values and other people's values.
Yeah. And guard your mindset, because it's not just about purity and having a higher vibration or thought pattern that allows the coherence, but also it's about tuning in to whatever beings, your higher self, et cetera, that want to give you messages. And when you are in a lower vibrational state, you are in a lower mental or emotional state, you are inviting in not the best of recommendations, because the lower level entities are then whispering into your consciousness instead. And it's not just about getting these intuitive hits, it's about the synchronicities too. So here's an example of a synchronicity. I had no idea that you were going to talk about heart math so much. And right on my desk right here is a heart math box that I still need to open. And it's on here because I haven't opened it yet. And those yours, of course. And we talked earlier before starting this interview about biohacking, and I was going to go grab a bunch of biohacking gadgets and things. This wasn't one of the things that I grabbed. Yes, I have a bunch of gadgets and things on my desk now for our interview in case we talk about biohacking. This was on there beforehand. Another example of synchronicity in action. So it doesn't have to be an intuitive hit. It could be a chance meeting that's not by chance. Nothing is random.
Thank you, Stephan. And I know for those who are curious to learn more about heart math and the research on non-local intuition, they can go to heartmath.org, put in the search non-local intuition, or just Google that, and that research will come up. Stephan, I'm so grateful for your love, for your wisdom, for everything that you're sharing with us today, whether listeners are entrepreneurs, want to be entrepreneurs, or anyone that wants to live their highest, best, healthiest life. And what you've shared with us are really practical tips that if nothing else, make us more curious to play and engage with our world at a new level. And thank you for your time. How can people learn more about you, learn more about your podcast, your books? There's so much wealth of love and wisdom that you have to share. Where can we go?
Well, I would start with getyourselfoptimized.com, which is the podcast all about spirituality and biohacking, life hacking, productivity, personal development. So that's a passion project for me. My area of focus in my business world right now is search engine optimization. So if you're interested in learning more about marketing and search engine optimization, then go to stephanspencer.com or netconcepts.com. Both of those sites have a wealth of information in those realms. But I'm also working on a self-help book, which will come out probably in another year's time, on personal development type stuff and spirituality. So I'm very excited about that. But yeah, start with getyourselfoptimized.com first. And if that intrigues you, then I would start reading up on some spirituality stuff, like Four Agreements or Celestine Prophecy, or whatever tickles your fancy to get you going, because your intuitive higher self, whatever you want to call it, is going to lead you to the right resources, and it's going to be an amazing journey. So I'm excited for you.
Oh, thank you, Stephan. Once again, you're just a wonderful soul, and I'm very grateful to you.
Thank you. And you are a wonderful soul as well.